Going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. I was going to talk about final OTAs takeaways. We'll probably talk about that tomorrow instead because Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler. And so let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. I know you guys have been saying, don't talk about Aaron Rodgers, and I've kept that as much to a minimum. We've only talked about him a little bit here as the wait has continued on. But now that it's over, let's talk a little bit about this. The Steelers officially have their starting quarterback. Let's not mince words. He's starting this year. If you have any questions, if it's Mason Rudolph or Will Howard, an injury is going to have to happen here. He's going to have to play like crap, something like that. So, where do I come in on this signing? Here's where Rodgers, I think, was good and where he was bad last year. The arm talent still there. He's got real flashes of brilliance. Got flashes of unbelievable ball placement last year. That was one thing where Aaron Rodgers he never lacked, and I never had a question about the arm talent. I thought that was something that for the Steelers is significant to know. Rodgers can make the throws to the middle of the field. He can make throws to the boundary. He can still push the ball down the football field. He will turn 42 years old this year, and even though it could fall off, I don't necessarily think it will. Rodgers has that juice in his arm. And you look all over his tape, there's cover two hole shots, there's quick decisions on dig routes. It's still there. He's got an elite release. He's always had an elite release, and that is not a question. So when the team splits him, those quick game concepts, really, really important. He got the ball out so quick last year. 2.65 seconds. He plays with timing and he plays with a ton of quick game. The Steelers wide receiving core, and I think this is a big issue for the Steelers, is how does that fit into that? DK is not a quick winner necessarily. Can Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson step into that role, or do they need to go out and get somebody? Certainly, I think that strengthens the need at wide receiver if you're the Steelers. If you really want to win a playoff game this year, I think you should go out and look at a Keenan Allen. I really do. Even if he wasn't what he once was, he is a route runner, chain mover type. And he even if he doesn't fit perfectly into the offense, he's the type of player they need to be hunting at least. Not to me, those big bodied outside guys. But Rodgers very much into this quick game type of deal, and that's going to be something to really watch. So the offensive line, at least this year, not going to have a ton of stress on it, even though teams do try to blitz Aaron Rodgers a lot because his mobility was at such a minimum last year. And that was the other thing. The Steelers really, I think, struggled to fully get going as a team outside of the moon ball last year. Can Russ change that? He's a more diverse target area type of guy, right? He'll throw the ball a little bit more around the football field rather than just to the sideline, but still a lot of sideline stuff. But the slant routes, those are coming, and those are what DK really eats on. More importantly, I do think that he's at least a little more open to the middle of the field. He's not compared to the league average for the most part, but I do think he is at least a little more involved in that area of the middle of the field. So tight ends, for example, Pat Frymuth, spot routes and things like that. Those can be more utilized. You'll sometimes see those slants pop out. You'll sometimes see the dig route there, even though he doesn't target that area of the field as much as a normal quarterback. It will be more than what they had last year, more than likely. Rodgers does really though like those out routes, those curls. But the slant is his thing. I think the slant is probably his best throwing route. Period. He can throw those deep back shoulders still. We there are ways here to work with tempo because he's all so good at that. Even as we heard with Russell Wilson getting the kind of freedom at the line of scrimmage taken away from him last year, do not expect that with Aaron Rodgers. This guy's going to have free reign to check, to push, to change the routes. Arthur Smith's going to have to give a little bit there. There's no question. I do think Rodgers can help open up the run game a little bit as a result of that. He sees different things. His ability to can calls, all of that works. And in terms of like RPO game stuff, that's such a good thing. So there are things to work with in the confines of this Rodgers idea. So let's talk about why he's not here yet. And in terms of, well, not he is here now, but why you kind of talked about these issues and what are these issues? Because I think people say, oh, he's not what he once was, but what does that mean? And so let's talk about Rodgers' issues. When Rodgers plays, at least last year, you know, 24th in success rate, 19th in EPA per play, so pretty average to below average in some categories just across, but the athleticism is the big point. He used to have this ability to kind of step up in the pocket, show some athleticism, run a little bit. And while Rodgers can certainly run on a bootleg game, it's not really his thing anymore. The Achilles plus the hamstring plus the knee injury last year certainly sapped some of that. Could there be more? Could he look a little more comfortable 2 years out of the Achilles? That's going to be a big question. But he was pretty fine in terms of he would get caught last year by defensive linemen in pursuit. But really, he can just do the bootleg game. He can play in pistol. He can play under center. So there is that at least. But he's not, you're not running much there with him. I also thought in terms of last year, there were some odd things. First of all, made some odd decisions at times, just as a processor. Rodgers is very typically extremely good at taking care of the football, and that should be a boon for the Steelers this year. Last year, he made some really uncharacteristic throws. Now that he's in a more comfortable offense, I think to his skill set, because this is a LaFleur offshoot offense, I do think this should be a more comfortable style for him. But it was a little odd last year seeing some of the processing gaffes he had. And so I do think that's one thing that Rodgers really struggled with, and teams would take away those slants and take away some of the quick game stuff, and at times that led to sacks and him taking a beating. So something to watch there. He also, since he doesn't have the magic really anymore to create outside of structure, sometimes there were just bad turn downs. And in the on time throws that there were there, sometimes into tight man coverage, were a little more dicey than you thought they would be. And so I really do think that is an issue. I also just think, you could tell Rodgers' lower body was bothering him because there wasn't as much involvement in the lower half of his body. He wasn't rotating as much through his throws. He was a lot more arm. He wasn't as much in terms of the footwork comfortable. Like you could tell, I think there was still some tentativeness there from some of the injuries. He was hurting. And could he look better in there? Because he needs to, because the accuracy at times would just go all over the place. He was a great thrower accuracy wise in his prime, but last year it was kind of a little bit erratic. And so that's something to look at with him. So with Rodgers, I mean, listen, the Steelers, if with him as their starter, is he better than Russ or Justin? I think that's a significant question. I think you can certainly argue that. I think if you can argue, is this a meaningful change? Is it going to catapult them to playoff wins? I'm skeptical of that. I'm skeptical that this is not going to end any other way other than, 10-7, 9-8 wild card loss. And so while the stats were really sterling last year, and while there's a lot of good there, and I think you can easily talk it yourself into Rodgers, and he was obviously the best quarterback available left for them. I also think there are concerns about this fit and how much it actually does for them this year. So we'll kind of see. But those are my thoughts on the Aaron Rodgers signing. Certainly, I think we're going to see them probably end up being a playoff team, or they're going to be playoff relevant, I think, to the end with Rodgers. I think the roster, when we analyzed it a few weeks ago, you could talk yourself into this roster certainly being better than last year's roster in a few areas. They still need a wide receiver. I think they still need a slot corner. So I still think they have some few needs that they need to attack here, but I think that wide receiver need, if they're serious about winning this year, has to be attacked. And I think there's a few names out there that you could look at, specifically the Keenan Allen name. I understand he's not what he once was, but I like him the best out of the options out there. And so we'll see where things go. But the Rodgers signing has always been kind of how I've thought about it. It's a fine signing, I guess, in terms of the player that they're getting. There are certainly some issues with Rodgers, and there are certainly some upside with him. but don't think this like dramatically changes my viewpoint of their season compared to when I thought it was in March when we thought Fields or someone of that caliber was signing. So we'll see. Like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell here, folks. Obviously, we will be at mandatory minicamp next week where Aaron Rodgers will be. We'll have interviews with him and talk with him. We will also talk OTAs tomorrow, my final wrap up kind of from that and what I learned, kind of who can maybe fit into this offense and maybe some things about the defense as well. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for that. And welcome Aaron Rodgers.